Hello and welcome to the How2Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. Hello and welcome to the How2Exit podcast. I'm Ron Skelton, your host, and today I'm here with Wayne Mullins. Wayne is the CEO of Ugly Mug Marketing, and we're going to talk about the differences in marketing when you're trying to scale or trying to sell the company or succession and all the different aspects of marketing. So welcome to the show, Wayne.
Thank you so much, Ron. I'm excited for our chat today.
Awesome. So let's just start with the origin story. Kind of, how did you get into this space? How did you end up, the CEO of Ugly Mug Marketing?
Okay. So it started for me with Zig Ziglar. So my parents gave me some CDs by Zig Ziglar back one year for Christmas. And Zig started me down the path towards sales. Before that point, I'd never considered sales to be a thing I wanted, but Zig Ziglar sold me on the profession of selling. And so that point forward, that was a pivotal moment in my life. When I graduated from school, the first job I got was in sales. And when I started on, I was absolutely terrible. But fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure which, I was very stubborn. And so I stuck with it. I kept learning, kept practicing, kept cold calling, knocking on doors, facing all those things, all the fears, I guess, that come with selling. And over time, I actually got good at this thing called selling. And it was as a result of getting good at that thing called selling that I noticed this very interesting thing happen. My paycheck amount was here, but the amount of money I was bringing in for the company kept growing and kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the gap between those two numbers kept getting further and further apart. And it was because of that gap growing that I had this dangerous thought in my head. What if I went and did something for myself? What if I actually went and sold something for myself? And so as luck or fate or, as the cards would unfold, so to speak, I decided to leave a really great sales job. It was a corporate sales job, and decided to start a lawn and landscape company. It was the only other skill other than selling that I had. So I'd done that through college and some through high school as well. And so left the corporate job, started from zero, and over the course of a 3-year period, grew that lawn and landscape company into a very sizable company. We came in from, out of nowhere. And by the time I exited that company 3 years later, we had pretty much every major commercial account in our area. And so it was as a result of that growth, as a result of that expansion so quickly, that people started coming to me and asking me, how are you growing? What are you doing to scale? And it was from those conversations that eventually Ugly Mug Marketing would be born.
Awesome. So let's talk about how that relates to the acquisition entrepreneurial world. In this space, we're buying, scaling, and selling companies. So we're buying them, growing them, and then selling them at some point. And a lot of people, there's people that might ask, why is a marketing guy on a podcast about buying and selling businesses? And there's a critical part of the whole process. It's integrated into every step, right? So let's just I guess we'll just start from, you're an acquisition entrepreneur. You're out there looking for businesses and stuff. What can an individual do or a small team do to position themselves in the market space as somebody that should be considered as a safe pair of hands for a company to land in?
Yeah, I think number one is the understanding that positioning does matter. In other words, whichever side of that equation you're on, whether you're on the acquisition side, you're doing the acquisition, or you're on the selling side, positioning matters greatly. And one of the best examples of this that I can recall was in the biography about Elon Musk. And I can't remember the exact title of the book, but the author goes into a lot of detail about how when Elon Musk had his company that was X.com and they had PayPal.com and they had merged together and they were trying to attract investors to put money into the company. And we're talking, this was way back then, but we're still talking tens of millions of dollars is what they were trying to get from investors. And the author of the book details how every single thing that they did was calculated to impress potential investors and to show them the potential upside in putting the money into the company. There was nothing left unturned. In other words, every single detail was carefully calculated in terms of making sure that it was impressive to the prospective investor. So, number one is just the mindset of, if you're on the selling side, what are the things that need to happen to ensure that your business evokes confidence, that there's sustainability, that there's growth, that the culture is right, that the systems and the processes are right? How can you quickly communicate those things? And it's often the communication that takes place is ancillary. And what I mean by that is this, that this is true of all marketing, but people would rather trust strangers they've never met than to trust you or I as the person pitching or the person trying to sell our thing. And so what we need to make sure we have in place if we're looking to sell is all those ancillary pieces, all the places that a potential buyer is going to go look for evidence of our story, right? So we communicate the story of the business and of the value of the business through our financials and through all the other methods, but they're then going to take that information and they're going to do due diligence, right? And so we have to begin looking at the peripheral areas. What are those areas, and how do we ensure that the messages being communicated through those other areas is relevant and in line with the story we're communicating?
It's interesting is I don't know if all acquisition entrepreneurs do this. I'm assuming they do, but when I'm looking at a company or somebody brings me a company, standard, you are who Google says you are. Of course I Google them. I look at their website and stuff, but I also start looking at their Google reviews, and I start digging down 2, 3, 4 pages inside of Google, not just the front page, and see what else pops up. Are there any Reddit strings talking about them? Are there any, complaints out there? Even I forgot what they're called, but the sites that where you go bash a company or whatever, the badcompany.com type of sites. I look at those, and it's because the company image matters, even though some of those disgruntled people probably are overzealous or whatever, or maybe a little bit too much. But there's truth in all statement. There's an underlying problem if you see a bunch of it, right? So I can see that what you're saying is it's not just the main webpage or whatever. It's not making sure no stone is unturned is what you said. I can see where that would be a critical part. Let's talk a little bit about the process, right? Guy's been running his business. A lot of the time, these businesses come for sale. The ones that we're looking at, they've been in business for 10, 15, 20, 30. I talked to one about a year and a half ago. They've been in business for 63 years, right? They're third generation. And, had a horrible website, they decided one day they wanted to sell and ended up talking to me. They didn't prepare for the process. Let's talk about that preparation. What are some of the things that a company that's been around for a while, doing what they do, doing it the way they do it, successful in their own right, or what are the things they need to start shifting and changing if they're thinking about handing over the reins to somebody else, either through a sale or even succession, right?
Yeah, so I would say that there's a difference in approach between the sell and the succession, and the reason is you're going to communicate to different audiences. And so the most effective marketing is the marketing that speaks directly to the desires, to the frustrations, to the pain points, to all of those things, to the specific audience that we're trying to convince, whether to buy or to take the reins of the company if we're doing succession planning. And so step one is making sure that we understand what we're after, because the way you communicate is going to vary based on succession or sell. So let's start with succession real quick. So one of the things that I think is so important in succession is that, if as an entrepreneur, if you know that you're building a legacy piece that you want to stay in the family, or you want to turn over to employees as an ESOP or something, we need to have a much longer runway to ensure the longevity of that company, because ideally we're probably going to be promoting or transferring ownership within some way, right? So it's succession within. And so for us as entrepreneurs, that becomes a longer process, a longer runway of training, of ensuring the values are the values, and they represent the team, they represent the leadership. And we often see it, in even in big corporate world, where when a leader passes the baton down to the next person, things fall apart. The best example I can think of is GE with Jack Welch. So Jack was there, a very strong leader, very well respected leader in the business world, and most people don't have a clue who replaced Jack Welch after Jack Welch was there. The leadership was completely different. And so the question for Jack and his legacy is, was Jack as great as we all believe he was, because he did not properly set up the company to succeed without him, without his direct leadership? And so for us, I think it's a mindset shift that if I'm going to look to pass my company down, hand it over, that I have to be responsible for bringing up that next level of leader and ensuring that we don't just leave them in the same state. But I believe a true definition of great leadership is that the next person who comes in is able to actually take it to a place we couldn't take it to ourselves. So that's kind of my long spill into the succession side of that.
You're right. The I was when I'm looking at a company, one of the things I'm looking at is I don't want to be the general operator. So kind of want to be the chairman of the board type of thing. So and my name is not going to be on the org chart, and I'm not going to be the CEO, right? When I'm looking, a lot of the people I work with on the acquisition entrepreneur side, they're the same. We're not buying something to be the day-to-day operator. So when we select somebody, there's got to be a communication process to instill confidence in not even just the market, right? It's also the suppliers and the customers, and there's and the employees and everything else, as to who this new individual is that's going to run the day-to-day operations, and why people should work with them, and what's important. I think that's missed, right? Where you're talking about like Jack Welch and the handover. I think a lot of us in the acquisition entrepreneur space, if we're not careful, could miss that. Like, when we acquire something, or sometimes, one of the things I like to do is look for somebody at the company that's maybe been a GM or whatever, or has that ability, right? So what's there that people can do to instill confidence in both the internal community, I guess we call it, the suppliers and the employees, and the external customer base?
Yeah, I think sometimes that when we're approaching that phase, I think by default, because there's a lot of sensitive information, right? So it could be financial information is being passed back and forth, and the new person's getting, maybe this is a terrible analogy, but maybe it's kind of like when the new president comes in of the United States. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that they're having to learn, having to process, that's confidential information. And so I think that the default is to withhold information because it's secret, right? Like, there's things that everyone can't know. But what I would say is the opposite of that needs to take place as well. Obviously, there's things that shouldn't be public for everyone in the company to see. But I believe a huge mistake I see people make is they don't communicate enough, right? They don't communicate often enough. They don't communicate frequently enough. They believe that a carte blanche press release email to all the previous suppliers or vendors or whoever it may be, saying, hey, we're the new owners, things are going to continue as they were, we're excited to do business with you. They believe that's enough. And at the end of the day, it goes back to one word, and that one word is trust. So the more that we can communicate with them, the more we can have dialogue instead of a monologue, the more trust we can build. And so thinking of it in terms of, when most people think of marketing, they think of going out to the world to reach new potential customers, things like that. But marketing is about persuasion. Marketing is about influence. And so in those phases, in those transition phases, the true work is actually a lot of the marketing work. It's a lot of the internal marketing work, ensuring that we're persuading, ensuring that we're convincing, and ensuring at the end of the day that trust is being communicated.
The first thing that comes to my mind when establishing trust with a new leader is, not just validation, like who is the guy, what's their background and stuff, but also value add. Um, Continuing to maintain the value you've always added to the employees, the suppliers, and the customers, but also what new value can you add? Because that's a fast way to instill trust. Is there new information you can provide the customers? Is there something you can add as an increased value, to kind of catch attention to say, hey, this new guy's really on this, and that was really useful. I'm looking forward to working with them. What do you think about like doing some type of like, I don't know, information or adding value to the existing base to build that trust?
Yeah, I agree. I think, in terms of that communication process, anytime there's a change, so whether we're talking about change in ownership or we're talking about, change in leadership, anytime there's a change, there is loss associated with the change. So when you think about a team, whether it's the core leadership team or it's all the employees within the company, when that change takes place, so whenever the new leader steps in, there is a loss that takes place in their head. In other words, the things that weren't once were true for us may or may not be true anymore, right? So my relationship with the former leader, or the way the organization flowed, or the way we submitted whatever, forms, or the way we even operated as a big picture is changing. Therefore, there is loss taking place in their head. They're going to have to give up certain things. We're going to have to, I don't have as much freedom, or I don't have as much direct dialogue with the person in charge anymore, or whatever it may be. But when there is loss, there is always a period of grieving. Now, I know that we're getting like psychology and all this other stuff, but it is a human, like if you go study anytime change takes place, and the way change takes place, there is loss, and then there's a period of grieving. And so what we must understand as the people that are often behind, we're the catalyst for the change, that we ignore that grieving process because we are in the position where we're more than likely, we're benefiting from all of this, right? We're in the position of benefit. But we must understand that they are going to go through a period of grieving. It could be an hour, it could be 10 minutes that they're grieving, depending on what they're giving up, or it could be an extended period. But that grieving process, if we're not cognizant and aware of it, what can happen is it can cause the culture to come down a level, right? We can have the period of grief within the culture of the team, and that period of grief will derail, or can derail, what we're trying to accomplish and the trajectory that we were on possibly as well.
But that happens at a micro level on almost anything, right? If you're a customer of a company, and you're like they're a supplier there to use, for instance, you've been buying something from them for 10 or 15 years, and even if you've only met that CEO 2 or 3 times, the second you hear they're leaving, what comes right to mind is that relationship. Man, I know the CEO, right? You know, um, I can think of a couple of different companies that, where I'd met the CEO and later on they retired or whatever. And when that, you get that message, hey, there's a new guy. And if your first instinct is like, I hope he's as cool as the last guy, right? Or I hope he can do what the last guy did. So there is that. I get that. I never called it grieving before, but I can understand where there's this process of, um, of loss. Like you lose that history you have. The customers lose the history they have with the previous owners. The employees, lose that. The last couple ones I looked at, that might be a good thing. It's not always a bad thing, I guess, but there is
I
that.
think
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the important point is being aware that it's going to happen.
Right.
The severity of it's going to differ depending on the context of the situation. But the more we are in tune with the loss and the grief or
Mhm.
grieving period that's going to take place, the more we can speak to that with
Mhm.
our messaging, and the more we can speak directly to the way that they're feeling, the smoother the transition is going to go, and the more trust capital we are going to gain in that period of transition.
No, let's go back to that. The owner's operating it, and he's thinking about selling it. And the thing that comes to my mind is the last few businesses I looked at. I go to their website. You know, they've approached me. They said, "Oh, I'm thinking about selling the business. I've been thinking about it for a year or two." But when I go to their website or any of their outbound communications, it's still them, right? If you go to their about page, they're about the team. There's a big photo at the top, and then there might be one or two other key employees below them. I think if you're thinking about selling your company, I think there's got to be a shift, right? Um, and who's the voice out in the market space? And it should be, my mindset is like when I'm looking for something and I'm looking to acquire, I'm looking for the team to be the center of the focus as opposed to an individual. What's your thought process on that shift that needs to occur?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that you know what causes success in the early days of building a business is typically the leader, the entrepreneur, being able to jump in and save the day. They become the hero, and that's not a bad thing. It's what's required often to navigate all of the changes and all of the relationship with vendors and prospects, and dealing with the early days of the team. But I think what happens is we develop that habit, and as we develop that habit that once served us so well can later become a very big hindrance to us. It can become a stumbling block to getting to that next level. And it's extremely difficult because it becomes a habit. We're not even aware, it's an unconscious thing that we're jumping in and saving the day. And, an analogy that I love to use is the difference between a border collie and a bodyguard. And so a border collie, I don't know if you're familiar or people watching or listening are familiar with, but a border collie is typically the dog that's used to herd sheep or cattle. And it's truly amazing. Like if you haven't seen it, go YouTube it. It's amazing the way they do this. But what they do is they work from the back of the herd, and they're very quietly steering and guiding the herd where it needs to go. And so for me, that is the analogy of the leader as they get up in the organization, as they've grown the company. They need to learn to lead from the back, allow their team members to step into the spotlight, allow their team members to receive the accolades and the attention and all those other things. The flip side of that's the bodyguard. So in the early days, it's kind of like a bodyguard coming in, and the leader has to plow the path. It has to clear the way for the people coming behind them, for the team that they're leading. And so, yeah, I completely agree. I believe that you know, people, when they're looking at making acquisition, they're buying the business. They're not buying you, the personality, the hero necessarily.
I guess there is one in like if you're out there and you're thinking about selling your business and you don't mind going the private equity route, they're going to want you to stay around for a year or two or three anyway. So, if you, that might be some of these guys are trapping themselves as in that's their only path, just because they're still center of attention, and that's why private equity companies, in my opinion, want that CEO around. Is they're wanting that to continue that relationship, and sometimes that relationship's a little hidden, right? I'm thinking about that company I was telling you, it was around for 63 years, third generation. Dad's still around. I don't remember if grandpa was still around, but the lady running it, the two sisters running it, I was like, well, is your dad involved at all? And it was like, no, 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 he's totally retired. But later on I hear from somebody I know that knew them, oh, I still go to dinner with him once every 2 or 3 months, right? One of the big clients still goes to, has been doing business with dad for 30 some odd years and still goes to dinner with him occasionally. Now daughter's running it, but there's still that interaction going on. So uncovering, what the dynamics are at a company and how to make that shift, right? There's a lot of play here. There's a lot of inside of the due diligence. A lot of people just look at financials, legality, legal liabilities. Maybe some people are starting to get smart and look at culture and the human side of due diligence. What's the culture? What are the team like? But there's also this historic due diligence, like what has been the pattern of communications, of marketing, and in essence, going to dinner with your clients every 6 months, for 30 years is kind of a marketing thing. If you think about it, you're maintaining relationships, you're doing one-to-one communications, it's a personal brand that you're instilling on them when you're there. What's your thought process on kind of uncovering the scope of the marketing communications that's happened over the history of things?
Yeah, I think Ron, that it's going to vary based on what you're actually buying. So some people, the acquisition may be about a customer base. It may be about leverage within a vertical or within a niche.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, it may be about the business itself, or a jump off point into a completely different industry or vertical. So I think clarity around what is it that you're actually buying, right? So that's an important starting point, I believe, for that conversation. And then once you're clear around that, I think that will shape and sculpt the due diligence that's required based on that. So, you brought up culture. How do you do due diligence around culture? How do you evaluate? How do you put a value on culture? And I do agree with you that right now, given the kind of employment environment that we're in, culture is a piece that for a long time has been way undervalued. And I believe, based on, we'll call it the great resignation, call it whatever you want to call it, that the actual true value of culture is going to become a more and more sellable component, sellable piece. It's going to be a marketable piece of the business. And so being clear about, again, what you're buying, that will shape and sculpt the channels, the avenues that you need to do that due diligence within.
Awesome. So let's say you're running a company and you're thinking about selling it. There's a story that needs to be created. I mean, there's even a strategy, or whatever you call it, a system in place that a lot of people use. They call it a deal room, where they create marketing materials and create the story of who the company is, where they've been, where they could go. Um, what do you think about that whole deal room? I want to call it story creation, because I don't know. Maybe you have a better phrase for it, but basically creating the picture of the story of who we are, where we've been, and where we could go, to potentially position yourself as a great acquisition for somebody like myself or another company.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think that it's regardless of if you're going to sell or not sell. I think the exercise of doing that will bring an owner so much clarity about, why they exist, how they exist, what the future could potentially look like in terms of vision for the future. So even if you're not planning on selling, I recommend the exercise, just because it forces you to put yourself from a different perspective, right? So, when you're running a business, the day to day encompasses so much that it's rare for us to step outside and to think about it from an outside perspective looking in. So I think the exercise in and of itself is extremely valuable for any entrepreneur to walk through. But the mistake I see so many make is they take the time to create, the pitch deck or the story, or whatever you want to call it. They take the time to create this, to write this, to draft it, to spend a lot of effort around this. But then where I see them messing up is there's no support material around it. And what I mean by that is, if you are going to look at a company, let's just say that I reached out and said, hey, we're looking to sell, and I send you over kind of our deck, our pitch deck on who we are, what we stand for, why you should care, right? Why you should be interested in us. And then as you start doing due diligence, if you don't pick up bits and pieces that support that story in your due diligence, then something's going to be off, right? There's going to be some red flags possibly that come up. Or if nothing else, you're not going to believe the story as fully as if you see evidence of what we're talked about in that story other places. And so the lesson, I think the important takeaway is this, that if you're going through the process, so you've created it, you're in conversation, make sure that in your other marketing messages, you are showing up in that same manner, in that same way. And I can tell you from experience, what often happens is it gets created, they're in conversations with prospective buyers, but the marketing looks the exact same as it always has. In other words, it's always speaking directly to the prospective customer. It's always speaking, to our products or our services that we're offering. And I think there's a whole nother element that's missing, and that is the pieces that support the business itself, the value in the business itself. So whether that's talking about the culture, whether that's talking about the depth of leadership within the organization, whether that's talking about growth trends, whether that's talking about industry trends. So all of these things don't directly speak to the people buying the product or service, right? They're not speaking to prospective customers or clients. They're speaking to prospective buyers. And that is a huge gap that I see when it comes to marketing.
I got it. And now let's talk a little bit about like inside of that, talking to prospective buyers and communication. I see a trend. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I see a trend where they're used to, if you go to almost any web page out there in any business whatsoever, there was always an About Us page, and it had the whole team on there. That's not around as much anymore, and I can kind of get it because it's very dynamic, especially right now in the market. People come and go, and it's disruptive if you've got a bunch of people kind of, looking at your team and seeing it shifting a lot. But when from a buyer's perspective, from when I'm looking out there, at some point I really got to see that stuff. Now maybe it's in your deal room, right? But what do you think is the core components that a company should have in their marketing communications when they're thinking about doing a succession or selling or whatever? What do you think is most important?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is depth of team, depth of leadership, um, in terms of the strengths within the organization, right? So you talked about it earlier. If you go to a website and you go to the about page and there's half the page is taken up by the founder, the CEO's picture, and then down below there's maybe a couple other smaller pictures of other people, that communicates a certain message. Whereas if you are communicating the depth of the team, the experience of the team, that goes a long way, because it's not all. Again, it's at the end of the day, it's about minimizing risk, right? You want to know, as a prospective buyer, you want to know that the bench is deep, that there's amazing talent throughout the team. So it's not contingent on one or two key players, right? That the team is going to succeed because of the depth of the team. Um, so I think that would be a huge piece or component. I think another one that so many overlook is what is possible for the future within your industry based on what is taking place in the world around right now. So all that data exists. It's so easy to find the data, and yet companies don't use that data to communicate what is possible for their organization. Number one, the internal communication matters a lot, right? Giving your team the understanding that, look, there's so much potential within what we're doing. We have so much opportunity before us. Like, it's endless, the opportunity we have before us. That creates a sense of hope within the organization. The other piece that is somewhat tied to that is the purpose. Why do we exist? The more we can communicate the why behind it as well, the more hope our team has and the more buy-in our team has. So team is a huge component, I believe, in the communication of that. There's some others, culture, bigger picture culture pieces, and the trends around our industry. So those would be my 2 to 3 top pieces.
You brought up something very important, that why we exist. A lot of the owners I talk to are really concerned about 2 or 3 different things. And it's the team, like their employees. Are their employees are going to be taken care of? Are they safe? Right. And then the second thing is they created this thing. It's their baby. So there's this legacy thing of They created it to do something, and they want to see that continue. But
Yeah.
to be honest, if it's not well communicated, not well marketed, not well documented, how is the new owner to continue a legacy that he didn't create, right? So, um, there's got to be some importance, and I guess that'd be a really safe way for if you're thinking about exiting and it's important for you to that your legacy, what you created, is stands, that it doesn't shift much, that it's a key part of your marketing communication, right? To tell the world, we created this to do X, Y, and Z, and we stand for X, Y, and Z. And so, if that's pretty solid, it's both attractive to new buyers like myself, and it's kind of hard for us to change, right? If I come in and you have no marketing communication, kind of got to make it up, right? Or I got to call you back in and go, hey, why is there nothing saying, you know, what do your customers believe you stand for? So,
Yeah, yeah. I think a core component, if you're in the position of looking to position your business to sell, I believe there's some core questions that will help shape and sculpt that for the future. So the first one is just where are we going, right? So that's
mhm.
the vision piece, like where are we going? The second part to that is what you were just talking about, is why does it matter? Like I see where we're going, but help me understand why does it matter that we get to that place? The next one would be for the individuals on the team, what's my role in this process, right? So I know where we're going, I know why it matters, but what is my role in this process? And that is more than just like, oh, your role is, sales, or your role is fulfillment, or your role is customer support. You have to break it down to a level where they understand based on where we're going and based on why it matters, what role do I play in bringing that vision to reality? And then the final one would just be, how will I be measured? Like, what will be the measurement sticks along the way that ensure that I'm heading the right direction towards that vision? So, where are we going? Why does it matter? What's my role? And then, how will I be measured in that manner? I think the more succinctly we can answer that as owners, as entrepreneurs, and the more clearly we can communicate throughout the team, what it does, at least from my experience, is it ensures everyone is going in the same direction without the constant need to push and prod and beg and and all the other things, because they see it, they understand it, and they know their role in getting there.
you know, um, and there's no fault to the business owners. A lot of the business owners in the market that we're looking at, and that's the most of us are looking for a business that can run on its own. So it's usually 10 or more employees. You know, a lot of people have different numbers, but 500,000 kind of seems to be the lowest most acquisition entrepreneurs look at as far as their EBITDA, right, or their seller's discretion earnings to profit. But if you look at that smaller company, a lot of those entrepreneurs didn't come out of Harvard or have an MBA or whatever. They were what I refer to often on the show as accidental entrepreneurs. They were able to create a really good widget, right? And like almost kind of where you came from, right? You were able to do really good sales, and at some point you went, "Why don't I do some sales for myself?" And then you realize I'm really good at marketing. I probably should start a marketing agency. But it wasn't all of a sudden I went to school, got an MBA in marketing. I worked for marketing for 15 years. I shifted over. You just became really good at something, at one element of your business. People started wanting it. So you started providing that service to somebody. I would say that companies, at least what I'm finding, and I maybe it's just because I'm a nerd. I have a marketing MBA and I love this stuff. I was a marketing coach for a while, but I would say in that realm that we're looking at, probably under the 10 or $15 million a year realm, there's not many companies that have a well developed marketing platform. At
Yep.
what level do you think companies tend to perfect that? You've worked with hundreds of companies over the years. When do they start to really pay attention to both internal communications and external communications?
Yeah, I would say that takes place, and I'll go backwards here in a second. I believe there's 5 stages of business, but I believe that takes place somewhere between stages 3 and 4. And I'll just give you a super quick overview of what I believe from my observation of the 5 stages. The first stage of business, I would say, is the me stage. So it's about the entrepreneur finding their legs, finding the audience for the widget. The next stage is the we stage. So that's when they're bringing on some team members and they're learning to trust team members versus just themselves. The next stage, I would say, is the they stage. And so this is when you begin bringing in systems and processes. And often at that point, there's some things that take place as you begin introducing systems and processes. Typically, the founding entrepreneur doesn't like those things because they're very entrepreneurial. They love jumping from idea to idea. And same thing with salespeople. Typically, they don't want systems and processes because it's not the way they're wired. And so you run in some friction points at that point. And so oftentimes what you'll find is that they fall back into the we stage. So the businesses, as they're progressing down, they fall back in because the entrepreneur doesn't want to adhere to the systems and processes that are needed for scale and for growth. The fourth stage, though, is what I call the machine. And that is where the me, the we, and the they, so me as the leader, we as the team, and they as the systems and processes, all learn to function together exceptionally well. And there's no right or wrong. Like, your business can be in any of those stages and still be successful. The question just becomes, what are you trying to accomplish with your business? Where are you trying to go with your business? And I believe that, the most sellable and the most scalable businesses are the ones who are down there in that stage, either late stage 3, early stage 4, somewhere in that phase. So they've got great, if they're in 3, they've got great systems and processes. They've got the team in place. Maybe they haven't all congealed together yet, right? So it's not operating at full capacity, which is why, great buyers can come in and get those things to work so well together and harmony together. And that's when scale takes place. So what I would say, all that to say, I believe that, the system and processes get introduced in that stage 3. But it's so important to get to the place, because in terms of valuations, if you're just a small team with people doing whatever they want, communicating however they want, there's no clear paths of measurement, no clear paths of, how things take place, then you don't really have much of a business system or process in place. It's kind of chaotic, and you're probably the glue that's holding it all together.
Yeah, I was curious if you had a kind of a threshold where you see that actually starting to naturally occur. I get it that it occurs when people want to sell because they've been trained that they have to put systems, processes, and team in place in order to maximize the value of their company. But in the natural progression of things, like I was telling you, I was talking to a company been around for 63 years, 3 generations, doing $13 million a year, and they didn't have systems, processes, marketing, communication. They just got in every day, did business, had good sales guys, landed deals, and been doing that way. And to their credit, successfully, right? They've been feeding 50 plus families for 40 or 50 of those 60 something years. So it's not that they're doing anything wrong. It's just if they want to position themselves to sell and make it easier to scale beyond that, I think they're pretty much at their threshold. To be honest, that particular company was managing the money side of it horribly, right? Anytime you sit in the same place, for too long, expenses start to pile up, I think. But
yeah, I would just kind of jump in on that and just say that, whenever I sold my first company, so, I grew the lawn and landscape company to a point, and then I decided I was going to sell it. I had no clue how to sell a business. So I hired a business broker to sell my company, and I didn't know what would happen. But within 2 weeks, I had a couple of different offers on the company and sold the company. In hindsight, hindsight's always 2020, but if I'd operated the company just a little bit differently, the valuation, the money I received at the exit, would have been drastically different than what it was. And so what I would say is, anyone who's watching or listening, find someone who has been on the acquisition side. In other words, find people who have actually bought businesses before, pay them to give you feedback, give you guidance on what your financials currently look like in terms of a prospective buyer looking at them? What are all the other core elements that a prospective buyer is going to look at? Because that information you can then take back and make adjustments. Because if you do get to the point where you're going to sell, those small minor adjustments in terms of the way you operate, in terms of the way you do your financials, can make a huge difference in the exit itself.
So the difference between a good business and a great business, or a average business and a great business, is not just, okay, I made extra 100 grand. It's, you went from 1x if you're just the sole operator and you're just basically selling your customer list to somebody, to 2.5x to 3x if you're under $10 million a year and you're running okay, to maybe 4 or 5x if you got great systems and process, an awesome team. You can demonstrate to that. You can portray a vision of, here's where we're going, here's the team that's going to get you here, here's the track record they've got so far to show you that they're on the path to get there, right? Now you can start talking about, even if you're under that 10 million mark, you can, a lot of businesses, and forgive me if you're in SaaS or one of those things, your multiples are way up there. There are some outlying companies, the multiples are just crazy. But for the average mom and pop, especially brick and mortar company, you can push that 3 mark up to 3.5, 4x, as opposed to getting 1x for your money. So if you're thinking of a company making, let's just say $1 million to make the math easy, you went from 1x, you got $1 million check when you exit, to 3.5, 4 million, because you've got everything documented, right?
Yeah.
So there's some significant reward for these actions.
Yeah, and I would say, just from my experience, the couple of times I've been through that, but also just from observation, working with clients who are doing lots of acquisitions or some that have actually just sold, um, that the things needed to take that multiple from, say, a 1x to a 3x, the things needed are not like drastically different from what you're already doing. It's a matter of making sure that they are well documented and making sure that people are following the systems and processes, and they're adjusting the systems and processes. And even from the financial side, I mean, small adjustments in terms of the way that you think about your business and the way that you think about your financials will make a huge difference if and when you get to that point of the exit.
I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs. They've got great businesses, but they're so entrepreneurial. They're trying to get the next patent and stuff. They spend every single penny coming in on what I refer to as R&D. Even if you're like a concrete company or something, they're still research. You're developing, trying new things, trying new mixes or whatever. No matter what type of, if you're a coffee roasting company, you're ordering different bean, but they're spending almost everything that comes in they don't need to live on trying to create the next best thing. There's a shift, if you really want to sell it, in being able to show that you can retain profits, right? That you can, that that the company is profitable and not just a innovation engine, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's buyers out there for innovation engines, but a lot of us that are doing this are buying something to either sustain life or create wealth for our future generations of our families. So, there's a shift in, like, I believe what you just said, and there's a shift in how the financials, need to be done. And there's some mindset shift to that too, right? Um, it's hard for some of these business owners to go from, hey, I don't want to pay Uncle Sam a penny more than I have to, that, hey, the guy buying me is going to look at an average over the last 3 years. So for the next 3 years, I got to pay a little bit more taxes so that the numbers, are appealing to a buyer. So
Yeah, yeah,
now
absolutely.
there's a question I ask everybody, and I love to ask it. What is one of the beliefs or common myths about your profession in your realm, it's still marketing space, that you really wish didn't exist, that you want to debunk right here and now? There's got to be something out there that just drives you nuts that people believe.
Yeah, the simplest one, but the one that is the most common, is this: that marketing and advertising are one and the same. So most people, when they hear marketing or they hear advertising, they think they're the exact same thing, and they're not. Advertising is merely a piece or a component of marketing. Um, our definition, and again, there's a lot of great definitions, so it's not like you have to take ours as the right one, but our definition of marketing is your ability to attract and to keep a customer. And when we say the word keep, we don't mean just like keep a customer and have them come back for more. We mean keep them and convert them into an evangelist for your brand.
Yeah.
And so from a marketing perspective, you've got the attraction side probably already in progress, right? You're doing all these things to attract new people into your business to get them to the point of sale. My question and my challenge for entrepreneurs would be, what are you doing to keep and convert customers? Because that is a marketing function, but often we believe that's a customer service function. But it is truly a marketing function. And we live in this world right now, Ron, where every single person watching this or listening to this has a device like this called a smartphone. And on that one little device, they can in an instant tell the world, or at least their friends, about their experience with our product, our service, or our brand. And yet, as marketers, we're not embracing that reality. We're not empowering our customers and our clients to go share about our company and about our products and services.
I got it. Now we're about 50 something minutes into this. I want to make sure people know how to reach you and how to communicate with you. So what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
The best place is just our website. That's uglymugmarketing.com. All of our email addresses, social media channels, all that's right there on the website.
Okay. I got to ask, how did you come up with the name Ugly Mug Marketing?
Yeah. Common question for us. Despite popular belief, it's not named after me. It comes from this gentleman by the name of David Ogilvy. So David Ogilvy came over to the United States, I believe it was in the late 50s. And over the course of a 15-year period, he and his partner built the largest ad agency in the world, which was Ogilvy and Mather. Still to this day, they're in the top 10 in the world in terms of size. David Ogilvy had this saying that was, I would rather an ad that's ugly and effective over one that's beautiful but isn't. And so the name Ugly Mug Marketing is really just to play off of that quote. And for those listening, they may not really understand our industry, the marketing industry, but in this industry, design awards, creative awards, all these different awards run the industry. So, all the agencies are competing, trying to win these various awards because, it makes them look good. They can attract clients. But for us, it's our North Star that says, look, we don't care about making something beautiful if it doesn't get results.
Right. Awesome. I appreciate that. One of the things I always ask everybody on the show is, what can we do for you, man? As a listener base or myself, is there something out there you're working on, or something out there you would like us to share, or what can we do? What can we do to help you move your business forward?
Yeah, I mean, for me, kind of where I'm at with my business and with my company, we're in a great place. We have an amazing team, an amazing culture here at Ugly Mug Marketing. And, what I would say to each person listening is this: the thing that would bring me the most joy and help me the most is for you to begin documenting your journey. Because in hindsight, when I look back at my journey that I've been on as an entrepreneur, there were so many important lessons that I now have missed out on, or that I didn't take the time to document, that I wish I had, because I could take those lessons and number one, I could share them with our team, right? So they don't make those same mistakes, or that they are able to do things much quicker than I did. So what I would say is, even though it's not directly for me, I would say that it would bring me great joy for people to spend a few minutes every day documenting, what lessons did I learn today? Because those lessons will get passed down to other people. But if we don't take the time to document them, they'll get forgotten.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate having you on here. And let's end on this topic real quick. We had a couple of minutes that we can use here. What if you wanted somebody to remember 3 things from this show? What would you want them to remember of you and what you've said?
Yeah, I would say number one is that whether you're going to sell, scale, or you're looking at succession, that at the end of the day, very much every piece and component of that is about marketing. And you cannot market clearly if you don't clearly and definitively understand the audience that you're speaking to. So number one, get clear about your audience, whether that's internal or external, and craft those messages that support that. That would be the first thing. The second thing would be this, that as entrepreneurs who are listening to this, maybe business owners who are listening to this, that you do have the ability to drastically shape and transform the valuation that you get from your company. And oftentimes it's a matter of making minor tweaks and adjustments. So I would encourage you to find someone who has been on the other side of the table, someone who's made some acquisitions. Pay them, trust me, to be worth far more than you pay them. Pay them to give you like an audit. Like if, pitch to them, say, hey, if you were looking at buying our business, what are the red flags? What are the things that you think we could make adjustments on? That will return significant, ROI for you in the long run. And then the final one is this, that, at the end of the day, that business is often about story. So it's the story we tell ourselves. It's the story our customers tell, about us, our employees, our team members say about us as an organization. So make sure that you're documenting those stories. Make sure that you're documenting those lessons, because if not, they will be forgotten with time.
Awesome. I appreciate having you on here, man. It's been great, Wayne. Anything else you want to add before we call it a show?
That's it, Ron. Thank you again for the conversation.
Man, it's been fun. Time flies, man. It's already getting close to the top of the hour. So let's call it the end of the show. That's it, guys. Hang out for a few seconds afterwards and we'll chat. Hey, it's your host, Ronald Skelton. I want to thank you personally for watching the show today and invite you to call our new hotline, 918-641-4150. That's 918-641-4150. Call us and tell us about our show, ask questions, suggested guests, or even tell me about a business you have for sale, and we'll reach back out to you. Again, that number is 918-641-4150. Call our hotline, leave us some information. Thank you. The Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind. The Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind combines the traditional peer-to-peer mastermind introduced first in Napoleon Hill's famous book, Think and Grow Rich, with accountability partnering, where your peers help you ensure that you set goals, take actions, and get results. If you want to scale, blow past roadblocks, and achieve success faster than you might think is possible, I suggest you take a visit over to TIEPM.com. That's TIEPM.com and check out the Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind.